Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped, and welcome to the Volkswagen Arteon R Shooting Brake. So big in here, I think I'll have a nap. Now it's safe to say that this car is cavernous inside. In fact, later on in this video, I'm going to be putting it to the test. Not only am I going to be able to get those two scruffy Herberts, get two dogs in the boot, but I am going to do can I get my bike in the boot? But I'm not going to use my road bike. I'm going to try and get my e-bike in the boot, which is a huge bike. But this is certainly a very big car, that's for sure. Oh, hold on a minute. Just needed to change the time zone on my watch because the rear of the car is in a different time zone to the front. Now, when I was a kid growing up, my dad had a Hillman Hunter shooting brake. So I grew up calling this format of car a shooting brake. But I think it's safe to say, in more modern parlance, we tend to call them estate cars if you're this side of the pond, or if you're in the US, you might call it a station wagon. But it got me thinking, is there a difference between an estate car and a shooting brake? Well, thanks to the ever valuable resource that is Wikipedia, apparently there is. So a shooting brake is this format of car on a coupe, whereas an estate or station wagon is this format of car on, well, we'd call them a saloon car or a sedan. But VW call this Arteon a shooting brake. And by the way, the history of the shooting brake comes from horse-drawn vehicles that were used when you went on a shoot that had a bigger space on the back for all the guns and the shooting party and so on. There you go, bit of history. But this Arteon R shooting brake is a handsome looking car, and I find it a very interesting car. Firstly, the practicality side of things, just the sheer space this thing has is right up my street, very useful for my lifestyle. But it's very similar in format to the Audi S4 that I used to have. In fact, I've had two Audi S4s. I like them that much. So let's deep dive a little bit more into the Arteon R shooting brake. Now this press car is presented in a beautiful colour. It's called lapis blue. And it's got a black and blue Napa leather interior. It's a stunning specification. Apologies for it being a bit dirty. I've been running this car for the last week. The roads are full of that horrible winter detritus, and last night there was the most biblical rainstorm ever, and I certainly wasn't going to bother washing it off and cleaning it because it gets picked up tomorrow. So apologies for that, but this is what cars look like in the winter, right? They can't be concourse condition. But it's a beautiful colour. Now, when I asked VW for a press car, originally I wanted to try the new Golf because I haven't driven the latest generation of Golf or Golf R, and they didn't have one available, but they said, look, we've got the Arteon Shooting Brake R, and actually it's got the same engine as the Golf R. So in there is a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, 320 PS and 420 Newton meters. And then that's coupled to a 7-speed DSG gearbox and a 4-motion all-wheel drive system with torque vectoring. It's a proper bit of kit, this car. 0 to 60, sub 5 seconds, top speed limited to 155 miles an hour. So this is a real sports weapon of a shooting brake. I quite like the dulled off silver mirror caps. It reminds me a bit of my S4. That was always the S4 Audi trait. It was an S model if it had mirror caps that were silver. And a few comments on socials when I put pictures of this car, people didn't like those. Personally, I really like that. This car also has 21-inch alloys, and they're a really nice design with a blue caliper. So externally, I just think it looks fantastic. And then the front end of the car, that view, it's classy, it's not too fussy, and I really like that. But what I love about it is the way that the car kind of slopes over, and unlike an estate or station wagon where the windows, I guess, would be parallel with each other, those come over and curve down, and the car slopes down at the rear, and it gives it this lovely, sleek, aerodynamic look. And the rear of the car, you can kind of see those lines as we come across down to the rear. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's a good looking estate car or shooting brake. I'll interchange those two words, I think. The rear of the car is just very, very subtle. It's got quad tailpipes, which mark the fact it's an R. It doesn't have Arteon written anywhere on the car. It has an R badge there just to designate the trim level, I guess. Privacy glass, banging, absolutely banging. I think the only thing that I might change is I might put like a black pack on it rather than having the chrome surrounds on the windows. I'd have that maybe de-chromed, and I'd have maybe black badging here. I just think that would look cool. It would tie in with these kind of black surrounds to the tail lights. But from a styling point of view on the outside, nails this car, absolutely mega. And it's not a car that you see that often, so when you do drive out and about, people tend to come up and ask you what it is, or you get admiring looks from people as you drive past. The question is just how big is the boot space? Well, with the seats up, there's 590 litres of space, so it's huge. There is a big lip though between the boot floor and this loading point here, so getting really big things in and out might be a bit tricky, but there's also a false floor under there and room for either a space saver wheel, or you could probably get a full-size wheel in there actually. I don't know whether I need to check the spec options on VW's website, but there is some extra space in there. But could I fit my e-bike in here? Now I'm going to have to take the parcel shelf out. I'm going to have to drop the seats down, but when the seats were down, I lay down in this car. I'm 6'3", and there was plenty of room from head to toe for me to lie down without touching this bit or without touching the front seats. That's how long a load space it is. It's that aperture size there, because my bike's pretty big. Now, I honestly don't know if this is going to be possible. I do have an advantage. I've got a dropper post, so let me put that down. That might make things a little bit easier. Handlebars and front fork sizes I think are going to be a challenge. Plus, this bike weighs, I don't know, about 20 kilos. So let me just... Oh, come on. It's got to go in. No. Oh, that isn't going to happen. Wonder if I can get my road bike in there. Hold on with me, bear with me. Right then, road bike. At least this one's a little bit more on brand with my hoodie. So, big frame, very high saddle height. Will it go in? Mind the paintwork. Wheels on. Come on, come on. Look at that. Just about perfect. Absolutely perfect. Now, I reckon the e-bike would have gone in had I taken the front wheel off. Maybe the rear wheel as well. The problem with the e-bike is the handlebars are so wide because it's got such big range on the suspension on the front forks. It's just a too big a size for the aperture. I reckon once it's inside the car, it'd probably be okay. But safe to say, the road bike goes in, although this car has a tow hitch. So maybe your better bet is to have a rear mounted bike carrier. But don't forget, if you are using an e-bike and using a rear mounted bike carrier, make sure your bike carrier is rated for e-bikes, because mine isn't. I've got a rear mounted bike carrier, but it's designed for normal bikes. Bear in mind that e-bike weighs, I don't know, 20 odd kilos, and that one is less than 7. So yeah, anyway, fits. So huge boot, loads of load space. With the seats up, you've got plenty, and if you've got that extra big thing you want to carry around, like a bike, drop the seats down, and honestly, massive, absolutely massive. But the space continues in the rear for the passengers. You can kind of tell when you look at the width of the doors are so long, but there's loads of room in here. And one of the things I thought you might lose out on is headspace, because the way the roofline slopes down at the back, I thought that might restrict headspace, but it really doesn't. Even with the pan roof, you can kind of see the mechanism of the pan roof stops here, but then it kind of goes back up and it gives you plenty of space. Really, really nice. So far, massively practical, loads of space for your rear seat passengers, but ultimately you've got Golf R performance. So let's jump into the driver's seat and talk about the cabin up front, and then we need to take this car for a drive because it's quite quick. Now, this is a very nicely designed, functional but quite clean interior. It's not an interior where I sit in and go, wow. However, the more time you spend in it, you start to appreciate the details. The nice material on the dash here, these seats I just think look fantastic. They're quite comfortable. I haven't done massively long journeys in this car, but they certainly look nice. And this black and blue Napa leather interior, you've also got on the bolsters, you've got this material that looks almost like a fabric carbon fiber effect. It looks really smart, and you've got the R logo embossed into the seat, and you've got the blue contrast panels on the rear of the headrest. So I think it just looks a really smart car, and that blue theme runs through. Now I don't know whether the camera's going to pick this up, but you've got like a blue lighting package. So on the doors, in the footwells, you've got these puddle lights and blue accents. On the steering wheel, you've got a little blue accent here. And then if I start the car, the dials have blue accents to them. So it's a kind of theme that goes through, and I like that a lot. In terms of the infotainment system, I never do so much about that in my reviews. I think it's fair to say VW over the last few years have had a reasonable amount of criticism for their infotainment system being maybe a bit tricky to navigate, a little bit sluggish in response. I tend to just go straight in and use Apple CarPlay. I haven't used the native sat nav, but it uses wireless Apple CarPlay. I've got a little charge mat for my phone just there. Drive modes wise, you've got 3 drive modes. To be honest, every time I've got in this car, I've just pushed the little R button on the steering wheel. You might have just heard the engine tone just go deeper and more rumbly. So we've got comfort, sport, race, and then an individual setting where you can sort of play with things and set it up how you wish. But for me, race gives a, it doesn't back off the traction control and make the car unhandleable. It just sharpens the throttle. It by default goes into a sport shift, or an automatic sport shift with the DSG. If I want to go into a manual override, I just push the gear lever to the left. At least it's got a gear lever, which is very nice. And then I've got manual paddles to change up and down if I want. I think the challenge for me, this car, we haven't talked about price and spec yet. So this car starts from just over £56,000. Now the car we're sat in, wait for it, is just over £64,000, 64,225 actually. And for me, that kind of price tag moves my barometer as to what the car needs to deliver. Interior wise, I'm not so sure. I feel like I'm sat in a £64,000 car. When I bought my S4, which wasn't that long ago, I think I paid £30,000 for that, and at that time 64 grand will get you like an RS6. And I know things have moved on, and I know new cars have become more and more expensive, but that's a lot of money. So this car better deliver when it's out on the road. Dynamically, it better deliver a great drive. So let's go and find out if it does. So unlike all the driving I've done so far in this car, I'm actually going to start off the review in just normal mode and just talk a little bit about the characteristics of the car. So it's a very long car, but you don't feel that length so much when you're driving. The only time you notice it is when you have to park the car. So even in a standard car park space, width-wise isn't such a problem, but length-wise, the front end of the car will stick out the front end of the space because it's just that long. I mean, it's certainly more longer and more cumbersome to park than even my Defender. But when you're on the road and you're out moving around, it's actually not so bad at all. One of the things I'm not so keen on, if I'm honest, is all of the display controls, whether that's the ones on the steering wheel or even the ones for things like the climate control, and then everything else is through the touch screen. They're all haptic style buttons. There's no physical clicky kind of button. They're all smooth haptics. Even the volume control on here, you just swipe your finger from left to right, and I'm not a fan at all, if I'm honest. Even just turning the temperature up and down on the climate control, there's just no tactility to it. I don't like it at all. But let's put that to one side and judge this car on its merits as a driver's car. Now, it's got power at 320 PS. What's that in horsepower? It's sort of 316, 17 horsepower, something like that. My S4 was The B9 S4 I had was 333, so it's a little bit down on power to my S4. But when you want to push on, it's certainly got the power there. So let's go and find a road where we can do that, shall we? Now I must say, one of the things I like about this Arteon is the space. I'm a tall driver, and in most cars I have enough room, just. Sometimes my legs feel a little bit kind of, you know, up towards me, and I can't quite get them as straight as I want them to be. In this, no problem at all. In fact, I'm having to pull my seat forward. There's that much space. It's huge in here. Now, hopefully, we might get a nice run up here. So here we go. I'm going to stick the R button on, race, and so we're in the auto change box. Pretty good pickup, to be honest. There's not a great deal of amazing noise. Every now and again you'll get a little kind of crack or a whip crack from the exhaust, which is quite exciting. And the nice thing is, it doesn't do it all the time. That DSG just hunted down there, changed down from 5th to 4th, back up to 5th again. So if you want a little bit more engagement, then all you need to do is just push the gear lever to the left, and I'm now in the manual box, and I can change gears for myself, and it does hold the gears. It's not one of these manuals that kind of reverts to auto if you don't do anything. Down into 5th, 4th, 3rd, turn in, and then it's got enough go. It doesn't feel like as fast as I thought it would do. And I would imagine that if you're in a Golf R, much smaller footprint, smaller car, just dynamically it will feel faster. This is quite a long, lazy car. And that then transfers into the characteristics of how it drives. Don't get me wrong, it's not slow, it just doesn't feel fast. There's a difference. Now, if I'm comparing this with other cars in its class, I know I've mentioned the S4 a few times. I guess the challenge with the S4 is the current S4 is actually a diesel. My one, the B9, which is the last V6 turbo, that's what I'm in my head comparing against. But yeah, the current one's a diesel, or I guess from BMW you'd be looking at something like an M340i, which is a phenomenal car, really, really good car. The gearbox is pretty quick on the way up. I don't have a huge amount of experience with DSG box, with the DSG box, but it's pretty good. It can sometimes feel a little bit lazy on the way down. You know, you pull the down paddle and then it just kind of hesitates. Typical, it didn't do it then. But then when you're on a faster, more flowing bit of road like this, it's actually got really nice road manners. It soaks the bumps up really nicely. It doesn't feel fidgety or jittery on the road at all. I drove it up to Reading yesterday, and there's some really grotty roads on the way, and it actually just dealt with those really, really nicely. So it's got very good road manners. Really, really good road manners. I'll let it off. It's quick. I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know what my expectations are. 320 horsepower. It's going to be sprightly, and actually it's probably all the horsepower you need to just enjoy yourself and not end up in a whole bunch of trouble with the law. You know, when you get cars that are 400, 500, 600 horsepower, you think, can I really use all of that? Really? I'm not so sure. So what are my final impressions of the VW Arteon R? Well, the things I like. I love the styling. I think it's a very, very good looking car. And what I like about it is it's quite a rare car as well, so people are not quite too sure what it is. The practicality of it ticks a big box for me, hugely useful for my lifestyle. Obviously you can get the bike in, it's great for the dogs. I just love that shooting, brake, estate format of a car. A fast wagon is always a good thing. And it is quick. It's not massively fast, so it was maybe not as fast as I thought it was going to be, but it's quick enough to put a smile on your face. Things I'm not so keen on the switchgear. This haptic, almost like piano black switchgear, I'm not a big fan of. Interestingly, I was in Germany just a couple of weeks ago with VW for the launch of the new Tiguan and Passat. I'll put my Tiguan video, a link up above. And it's quite interesting, the VW have almost taken a little bit of a step back with some of their switchgear in the new Tiguan. There's a jog wheel to control the infotainment system. The infotainment system's been upgraded a lot. It seems a lot better than this one in this particular car. So I think that will be interesting to see if that filters down into other models like the Arteon. It's an expensive car, there's no doubt about it. I know all cars are expensive these days, but for that kind of money, for mid-60s money, I can get a lot. I mean, that's more than I paid for my Porsche. And I know that's a slightly different category of car, but it's punching heavily up against some really, really good cars from BMW, from Mercedes, from Audi. But it has a character and a style that I think is able to hold that kind of price. I think it probably needs to be 5 or 10 grand cheaper, but let's face it, a car of this quality with this engine and drivetrain and performance and interior fit out, you're going to be looking at 50 grand plus these days anyway. But yeah, no, I like it a lot. I'm starting to get my head round VW. It's a new brand to me. I've only just started working with the brand, only just started getting access to their cars, and there is much to learn. Whenever you start working or driving new cars, there's different things to get your head around, whether that's the infotainment system, the drive modes, the feel of the car. And I'm finding that process really, really interesting. So let me know what other VWs you'd like me to get my hands on, and I can have a chat with the VW press team. But for now, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty